situation and in all conditions, trusting that in all conditions, we want to be able to see you, and you are present in all conditions. And since you are present in all conditions, in all circumstances, then we can do anything through your grace, through your power, through your love, and through your strength. I thank you for allowing us to gather here right now virtually and to be nourished by gathering around your person and being able to enrich and to discuss the different things that happen in our daily life. And you are not far, but you are near and you are present with all of us. I ask you to bless all my brothers and sisters who are present right now, and Mina, the speaker, and make it a wonderful opportunity for all of us to be nourished spiritually, socially, and in all aspects, and glorify your holy name in everything that we do, everything that we say. Through the prayers of all the choir for heavenly hosts of angels, the intercessions of the Holy Theotokos and Mary, and all the saints, hear us as we pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not to temptation. Deliver us from evil one. In Christ Jesus our Lord, yours is the kingdom, the power, the glory forever and ever. Amen. Thank you, Mina, for being with us and joining us. Are you going to be having a presentation, or are you going to be talking?
I do have a presentation.
Okay.
So I can share my screen.
Sure, because if you don't have a presentation, I would have asked people if you can keep the cameras on, but if you have a presentation, so we don't have to, but maybe towards the end, maybe we could, when we engage in a discussion, it would be helpful for all of us to keep the cameras on. Go ahead, Yamina.
So I will ask those who are comfortable sharing their screens to continue sharing their screens. Reason being, I am actually keeping it in gallery mode so that I could see everybody's faces.
Perfect.
And for people who do know me, they know that I like to make a lot of jokes, and I kind of feed off of laughter. Like, it's kind of like Monsters Inc., how they discovered at the end that the laughter like powers them more.
Yeah, don't ruin the movie, man.
Sorry. You haven't seen it yet? Sorry, Aki. But yeah, if those who are comfortable turning on their camera, I want to see you laugh or not laugh at some jokes, so that I know not to use them in the future, if that's okay. Cool. Okay.
I would second this this approach. I mean, I personally want to see everyone. I think we miss seeing faces without mask and seeing one another. So if we can keep the cameras on, this would be amazing and great. And that's amazing. Thank you.
And how much time do we have? I heard about 2 hours. Is that right?
Yeah, 5 minutes.
Oh. Okay, cool. Well, we better get started.
And just before we start, I think Marina has a quick announcement to make.
Yes, we will be playing a game at the end for anyone that would like to join after the talk. It's called Bible Mad Gap. I don't know how many people know that game, but I'll explain the rules afterwards.
Perfect. The floor is all yours, Yamina.
Okay, thanks. But seriously, how much time do we have?
Like 30 minutes.
30 minutes, right? Okay,
yep.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, everybody can see my screen okay? Give me a big thumbs up.
Yes, sir. Go for it.
Yep. Awesome, guys. So thank you for having me. My name is Mina Mikhael. For those of you who don't know me, I am one of 19 Mina Mikhaels that you probably know. And today we're going to talk about pandemic proofing your money, which feels like a really, really big topic. So before we dive in, I do have a disclaimer for us. Okay. Here we go. So disclaimer, first thing is I am just a guy. I'm not a financial advisor. I am just a guy with a keen interest in personal finance. Cool. So as we discuss and as ideas surface, if something really sparks your curiosity, we could chat within this forum, but I definitely encourage you to actually go out and seek a professional opinion about some of the things that we're going to discuss. Cool. Which brings us to point number 2 there on the right, the light bulb, is we're going to scratch the surface on several topics. In 30 minutes, we don't have enough time to actually get really deep into any of them. And as I was putting this together, actually, when we start talking about one particular area, that is the area of investing, you'll find that that's very true. Like we're starting to scratch the surface, and I actually started building another slide, and then that slide led me into building another slide. And I'm like, no, we got to remove all that because we've got 30 minutes, not 2 hours. Thanks, Abuna. Joking. The next point is this may at times feel uncomfortable. we're going to be talking about financial behaviors in some areas. And my goal for you is that this would help you reflect on some of the financial behaviors and decisions that we make day to day and how we can optimize them. And that could lead to a little bit of discomfort. And that should be okay. Let's embrace that discomfort, because you've heard it before, we don't really grow within our comfort zones. So let's really have the conversations that take us outside of those comfort zones. And finally, a lot of the information that I'm going to be presented is actually the founder or the original thinker here is a guy by the name of David Ramsey. So if you don't know Dave Ramsey, he's a Christian speaker. And I'm seeing a couple of you not already. He's a Christian speaker who talks about money and personal finance. And he's one of the podcasts and YouTube channels that I actually like to keep in the background sometimes as I'm doing work. And a lot of these principles and philosophies are actually coming out of his work. So I do encourage you actually to check out Dave Ramsey and his team and just get an understanding for the system that they encourage people to do. They focus a lot on debt recovery and like coming out of debt. So we're taking a bit of a different spin on it by talking about pandemic proofing. Cool. So last time I was here presenting to the Edge Group was in 2017. Thanks for having me back right away, guys. I'm taking this as a positive. I'm thinking most speakers actually it takes them about 7 to 8 years to return. At least that's what I'm telling myself. And for me, it was only about 3 years. So it's a good thing, right? The last time that we connected, we spoke about, the topic was, what does God think about money? And it was a bit of a complex conversation. And really we came to 3 conclusions. Number 1 is God does not hate money. Okay. Number 2 is God encourages us to be wise with money. And the third one is probably the most important one that we reinforce, is that the love of money is the root of all evil. It's not money itself. It is the love of money that is the root of all evil. Now, last time we talked was in 2017. Since then, the world has changed. We've got all sorts of things going on. We've got this thing called COVID. COVID is resulting in job losses where some people are like working from home. Some people are actually like making more money during COVID, or they're saving more money. House prices are through the roof. I don't know if anybody follows the real estate market. I do. And it's just like the number of times that I've sent a friend of mine an OMG text message about a sale price that we've seen in our area is just, it's getting kind of boring actually a little bit. And then you've got stock markets, bonds, TFSAs, RSPs, ABCDEFGs, which is one of the jokes that I was really excited to tell you guys. For anybody who's not too involved in different types of investment accounts, ABCDEFGs are not a real account type. And then like if anybody's been following recently this whole GameStop thing, is anybody watching that? Yeah, I'm seeing Yusuf nod. I'm seeing Marina nod there. Like just absolute insanity going on in the world, right? And there's a term that there are actually 2 terms on this slide that I'm going to share with you that our CEO at work says often. The first one is VUCA. And VUCA, he didn't make up that term. That term exists in the world. But VUCA is a term used to describe the world that we live in right now and the conditions that we live in right now. They are volatile, they are uncertain, they are complex, and they are ambiguous. These are the circumstances that we are managing within today, VUCA. So always think about that. Try to remember that. I know you're going to remember VUCA, but you're not going to remember any of the words that it stands for. So if you Google VUCA, you'll get this pop up. Okay, so remember VUCA: volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Now, I've got good news for you. Is personal finance is 80% behavioral. Think about that for a moment. Personal finance is 80% behavioral. It is within your control to actually not worry too much about the left side of that page. It's real stuff, right? COVID is real. Job impacts are real. But we're going to focus on that 80% and the things that are within our control. Here's the other thing that my CEO always likes to say is, let's not complain about the rain. Let's go build an ark. And so today, our goal is to build a financial framework that can weather any storm. How does that sound? Sounds good? All right, perfect. Abuna gave me the thumbs up. So we do have a playbook. We do have a framework to guide our thinking, and that's the Bible. And so there's actually a lot within the Bible when it comes to money, but there are 5 principles that I'd like for us to focus on today. These are budgeting, eliminating debt, saving and investing, not keeping up with the Joneses, and giving back. So we're going to dive into each one of these, talk about them for a little bit, and then we'll have some time for discussion at the end. Cool. So this is really our agenda over here. So let's talk about the first one. Now, for each one of these principles, we're going to start off with one or maybe two verses, and then we're going to dive in. So the verse here is, for which of you intending to build a tower does not sit down first and count the cost, whether he has enough to finish it? And this verse is really talking in nature about budgeting. It's the budgeting process, right? But there are two things that catch my attention in this verse. Is that it's not just, the Lord here isn't just talking about budgeting, right? He says, who doesn't sit down to first count the cost? So that's the process of budgeting. But the second piece is whether he has enough to finish it, right? And what that's talking to us about here is income versus expenses, right? If your income is insufficient and you lack the budgeting process to understand that, then your expenses will exceed your income and it'll throw the scale off balance. And here's the wild thing, folks. A lot of people aren't paying a lot of attention to this. The way that our credit system is set up in North America, actually, I don't know if it's just North America, it might be a global thing. Like the way our financial institutions are set up is it's really easy to borrow money. And it's really easy to borrow much larger sums of money than you should be borrowing. And if people aren't careful with that, you allow your expenses to sneak up. And here's the thing about expenses. You notice the income is like one big rock over there in this illustration. Expenses are typically much smaller. So psychologically, the impact, the psychological impact of making one expense feels small compared to the joy of getting a large income once every 2 weeks or so. So you don't give as much attention to the small expenses and they rack up. And this is actually something that we studied back when I was in business school back in the day. It's the dollar a day strategy is what it's called, right? Where, you know, for less than $1 a day, you could have blah, 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 blah. That has, I don't remember the numbers, like this is many, many years ago. But I do remember the key message here is that the dollars a day strategy, reducing the payment that is shown, actually results in higher purchase intent and actually higher purchases, not just the intent, than showing, for example, $30 a month. So the smaller that you can make the payment, the more affordable, the more in reach. And that's really what this is about. So we're going to talk a little bit about budgeting, and I'm going to give you guys a little bit of homework, if it's okay. Here's what I encourage you to do. You're going to create a budget. You are going to, you know, at some point in time, let's call it over the next week, what I encourage everybody to do is sit down and create a budget. And here are the steps that we're going to follow, okay? First thing is you're going to create categories. So before you even look at any numbers, sit down and create categories and take a guess at how much you spend. How much you spend on food, how much you spend on clothing, how much you spend on your car, your house, whatever you could think of, throw it into a bucket, okay? Add a miscellaneous bucket at the end because Lord knows we all spend money on things that we don't know what they are. But add a miscellaneous bucket and then throw a number against that, like how much you think you spend on miscellaneous. Then I encourage you to do step 2 over there. Pull up 3 months of statements from every single card or account that you have and bucket every transaction. This might take you some time, okay? But bucket every single transaction and then match up what you've done in step 1 of creating the categories up against step 2. Clearly and very quickly, you'll identify like, wow, I'm spending way more on this thing, on food, for example. Food tends to be a bad one for me personally. I'm spending way more on food than I thought I was, right? I'm spending way more on gasoline than I thought I was, right? But then the next step is identifying where you may have overspent, right? So step 4, did I skip step 3? No, bucket your expenses and see how much you're spending per month. And then step 4 is identify where you may be overspending. So for example, for me, when I did this exercise, and actually I do this exercise about once a year with my wife, is we'll sit down and we'll review everything. And frequently we find that we are overspending on food specifically versus our budget. That's when you start to make a plan, okay? And you decide, okay, this is how much I'm gonna set on this budget, and that's it, I'm gonna cut it off there, right? Step 5 is the most important one. Live by your budget. So a study coming out of the States in 2019 showed that 67% of Americans, so about 2/3, actually budget every month, but only half of them actually follow their budget. And again, given the ease by which those expenses can creep up, if you're not going to do step 5, the whole budgeting process is kind of a moot point then, right? So I encourage you all to live by your budget. Now, what I have for you here is a recommended budget. Okay, this is by no means the only allocations that you should have in terms of how much you spend in certain categories. This is a recommendation that I found personally sounds about right. Okay, fits quite well with us here. However, I do encourage you to take a look at a few things and just a few different budgets online and understand sort of how much you should be allocating towards each bucket. Cool. Any questions on this, guys? No? Okay, cool. The next one, eliminating debt. So this verse is kind of a strong one. The rich rules over the poor, and then the second half of it is the one that kind of resonates. And the borrower is servant to the lender. That kind of sounds tough. Like I don't want to be servant to a lender. I don't want to be servant to American Express, right? But again, it goes back to what we were talking about. Is it's so easy to borrow money, and here I have the credit cards because it's a lot easier to find their logos. But there are all sorts of credit services available that really prey on people who are looking to make ends meet, unfortunately. So for example, payday lenders are one example that charges something like 300%. If you actually do the math on the interest rate that payday loans charge, it's something like 300%, right? Credit cards are around 21%, usually 21 to 28%, depending on the card, depending on the history, all that stuff. It's not, it's very difficult to get ahead financially when you have a very constant pull away from your money going towards interest that you're paying. Okay. So there are 3 myths of debt that I'd like for us to talk about. And again, I'm picking on the credit cards, but it's not just the credit card. So here are the 3 myths of debt. First one is there's good debt and there's bad debt. Is this a myth? Any thoughts? I actually want to hear from you guys. I feel like I've been talking a lot, and frankly, I do need to take a sip of water. I want to hear your guys' thoughts. I believe it is a myth that there's good debt and bad debt. Debate me. Let's go.
No.
Yeah.
I'll say that that's the truth.
Why?
For example, like having a house and having a mortgage, that's debt, but that's good debt because you're building equity.
Okay. Anybody else? Talkative bunch, guys. Come on.
Okay, I don't know if I agree with Aki or no, but from reading and hearing about some investment recently, I found out that a house is not just a good debt, but it's some kind of a bad debt in the same time. It's a debt that we have to live with for a certain time. It's some kind of a liability.
So Mariana, I
yes.
like what you said there. And I actually agree with you a lot, is a house is a kind of liability actually, right? We consider our primary residence as assets, which is a really, like, it's an interesting mentality. It's an asset because our real estate market has been growing, right? And so we have this mentality of buy a house because the value's gonna go. What if the value of your house never went up? Would you still consider your house an asset? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. It's hard to know for sure.
Only when it's sold, which
Only
you'll
when
have to go to another house, which probably going to be much expensive, and you'll pay more.
Exactly.
And you get into more debt.
You always have to. So the place you live is probably actually not an asset, right? So now here's what I'll say on this point. Aki, you believe that this is actually a truth. It's not a myth. I would argue all debt is bad. Some of it is necessary, but it's all bad. I really dislike my mortgage.
Everyone does.
Exactly. Okay, thank you. Everybody dislikes their mortgage. I've never met somebody that said, oh, I'm so glad I'm paying my, $2,100 this month. I can't wait, right? My conversation with my wife Heidi is constantly like, when we finish paying our mortgage, geez, that money is going to go towards blah 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 and blah blah blah. And I'm like, geez, like let's beta, like they say in Arabic, like we're still ways away, but it's shackles, right? The borrower is slave to the lender. You're unfortunately, like it sounds really intense, but we're tied back, we're held back by this debt. Now it is necessary. My family has to live somewhere. We have to live somewhere. Okay. OSAP is another example of a necessary debt, right? You need to go to school. You need to get your education. And if there are no other means to pay for school, yeah, take the OSAP and go to school, right? But coming out of school, don't go into point number, I put them in the wrong order here. Okay. Don't go to point number 3. So point number 3 says, I'll just pay it off over a longer period of time. I just graduated school. I'm working now and I've got X dollars on my OSAP. I'm just going to pay it off over like 15 years, take it easy and go do something else. Here's what I'll show you. Okay. So false. Okay. So yes, Abuna.
Mina, I want to talk about some like say for something like debt, sorry, like the house. So the house is a debt. So what you're saying that instead of using good or bad, all debt is not good, is not recommended basically, but there are some debts that are necessary, right? So this
Correct.
is, so we need to do a mind shift from good or bad to necessary or not necessary, right?
Correct.
But there's another aspect, for example, like you have to live somewhere. So you have an option to live in a house where you are paying a mortgage, but it is building an equity versus, for example, renting, where basically the money that you're using, it might be less, but it's not going anywhere. So how do you think about this? How do you classify about it? Especially, I believe that my understanding when I came to North America, it's a kind of the standard is everybody's gonna be in debt, especially when it goes to a house.
Yeah. So I agree with that sentiment, Abuna, is that debt has been normalized, particularly mortgage debt. Okay. So so I'm gonna ramble on a couple of things if it's okay. Okay. The first point is, when it comes to house ownership, I think house ownership and property ownership in general is very important. And I encourage everybody to try to work towards property ownership. Okay. Not because our property values in Canada tend to appreciate. Frankly, I do think that our real estate market is, dare I say, a little bit inflated. Sorry. Okay. No, but reality is, I do believe our real estate market is slightly inflated, right? I don't believe people should be buying houses so that they could make money when they sell them. I believe people should be buying houses so that they could pay them down and eventually live mortgage free and rent free. Okay. But that is exactly why I believe people should hate having that mortgage and be very purposeful trying to clear it out, right? So that they could get to that point. So it's not the capital appreciation. If you want to make money on the value of the house going up, go buy an investment property, rent it out, sell it later, and you make money on the difference. Cool, right? But if this is where you're going to live, take the debt. Don't like it, get out of it. Okay. And the other thing I'll address, Mark, I sorry, just one more point that I'll address with Buna. I referenced Dave Ramsey earlier. Dave Ramsey and his team, there's a gentleman by the name of Chris Hogan, who did a study on everyday millionaires. So that the way that they defined everyday millionaires is people who retired at 65 years old with at least $1 million of net worth. Okay. Not your ultra high net worth individuals. Like, we're not talking about like your Bill Gates, Warren Buffett's. We're talking about the guy who lives down the street, who has accumulated enough wealth to retire with dignity and comfort. And they looked at the average amount of time that it takes them to pay their mortgage. In that study of 10,000 plus participants, it was 11.2 years. That is the average amount of time that it took them to pay down their mortgage. Now, this study is coming out of the States where property values, there's a much wider range of them. You have markets like California or New York where they're much higher, and then markets like, I don't know, like maybe Nebraska or something. I don't know where it's low, Florida, but other markets where property values are much lower. So that's another data point that I want everybody to keep in mind when it comes to that mortgage piece and being purposeful to pay down. Is there's actually research behind why it's important to pay your mortgage down quicker. Mark, you had raised your hand.
Yeah, no, I was just going to ask, are you in principle too only talking about interest-bearing debt?
I'm talking about all debt.
So let me put something into perspective just to maybe get the conversation fueled a little bit. What if you were to purchase something at 0% financing?
Yep.
Well, it's not necessarily debt. It's the same purchase. It's just that when you go to McDonald's and you buy a $1.50 burger, you don't finance it, but you still buy it. Whereas when you buy a home for $500,000 or $1 million, you don't have the choice, to pay it off all at once. If you did, then it wouldn't necessarily be debt. It would just be a purchase.
So I like where you're going with it. Let's remove homes from the equation because we've established that homes are somewhat necessary. We need to live somewhere. So that debt, although we don't like it, it's still bad debt. We've established it as necessary debt. But Mark, what about a car? Is financing a car at 0% interest, for example, is that okay? Like that's debt, but is it okay?
I'd actually like to argue that, yeah. I mean, you need that car to go make money so that you can have some sort of life, some sort of earnings, right?
Yeah.
So if I would only consider debt, and this is just my perspective and I could be completely wrong, but I would consider bad debt any debt that's interest bearing, that's beyond the ROI for what it is that you're using that asset for. So whether that's a car or a home or whatever, if the interest that is on that asset is too high and it offsets the ROI that you're making, and you're living month to month with your paycheck or paycheck to paycheck, as they like to call it, because you're trying to pay off this mortgage, maybe this isn't the right idea, right? Yeah. That's kind of what my mentality is. If I don't have a car, I can't go to work.
Right.
I'll give you another example. Microsoft offers you financing on your computer, right? So you say, okay, I'm a student, I can't afford a computer for $1,500, but what I will do is I will go to Microsoft, finance this computer as a student at 0% interest for 1 year, 2 years, whatever it is. Apple does the same thing, right? Because things are getting just a little bit too expensive for people to
Mark,
deposit cash.
Let me ask you a question. Why do you think they offer 0% interest?
I'm not quite sure. Sometimes it's just to be able to make the sale, I guess. if they're not making any money on their money.
It's to enable, and again, keep in mind one important thing. This is my opinion. Like I'm in by no means a professional here. So we're two guys talking right now, okay, or a group of people talking. It is to make the product more accessible to more consumers. Okay. There's a group of consumers in every market. There will be a group of consumers for which the product is out of reach. And once you make that product available to those consumers, you've now expanded the overall market that you could reach with your product. If you can't afford a computer, for example, from Microsoft, and you're going to finance at 0%, cool. That computer probably costs more than a different computer that you could go out and buy, maybe a used computer, I don't know, maybe something else, for probably a fraction of the cost. And so what actually ends up happening with 0% loans and with credit cards is they enable us to spend more than we would have spent otherwise. So I'll give you guys an example. My wife and I in 2015 went and bought a brand new car. Okay, we bought a Hyundai Tucson, and it was a cool car. It was like a really nice car. It had all the options. But here's what we did. We went and we sat down with the guy, and it was going to be 0% over 7 years. We're like, oh my God, these payments are nothing. Okay, so we loaded the car up. Like we went in with the idea of like, okay, Heidi's car right now is not the greatest. We want to put her in something better. We plan on having kids soon. Cool. Here's an opportunity because Hyundai is trying to clear out these 2015s because they're redesigning 2016. Awesome. $4,000 off. Awesome. 0% financing. Let's go. Nav, leather, sunroof, everything. And then we walked out buying a whole lot more car than we ever intended to buy going in. And this is the effect of things like 0% financing. This is the effect of paying by credit card or by watch. Oh my goodness. Guys, the watch is terrifying me. The ease with which you let your money go, just tap it and forget about it. It's incredible. Our payment system is evolving to make it easier and easier for you to part ways with your money. And unless you are very careful not to allow debt to creep up, things like 0% financing and interest, high interest loans, they will creep up on you. And Mark, I'm going to address with one more point here, not to belabor it, but you're focusing on the interest component, right? But there's also the payment, the principal payment, right? Interest rates right now are super low on mortgages. People are spending way more on houses. They are forgetting that they are actually indebting themselves to the tune of like over $1 million. You owe $1 million, whether or not you're paying the interest on it, right? And that needs to be the mentality. The interest is one very important piece. Cool. But the amount of money that you're actually taking on, that's the part that people forget. Next time you guys go buy a car, don't talk to the salesperson about your monthly payments, because they will always go to the monthly payments or the bi-weekly payments even. Tell you, yeah, the payment's only $203 bi-weekly. And they're like, oh, $203 bi-weekly, that's nothing, right? Talk to them about the total price of the car. They'll get uncomfortable doing it because they're trained to sell the other way. Good chat, guys. Good chat. In the interest of time, let's keep going. And I will leave you with this when it comes to the topic of interest. The importance of paying debt off as soon as possible. A $40,000 loan at 5%. So I'm thinking OSAP here for a lot of people. This is within a fair range. Paid off in 3 years is going to cost $43,000. Paid off in 9 years will cost 49. So the interest triples. Paid off in 15, 56,000. So this is a very important piece to keep in mind is the sooner you pay off debt, not only are you freeing yourself up from that interest obligation, but also the amount of principal that you've now, that you've been paying towards that debt, you've now unlocked to do different things and more good in your life with. Good chat. All right, you guys set the bar high with that principle. I'm hoping for a good one here as well. The next principle is save and invest. So we've got two verses here that I've put in, one for saving, one for investing. So first verse is, in the house of the wise are stores of choice food and oil. It does not say of mediocre food and oil. It does not say of satisfactory food and oil. It says of choice food, high end, right? And that to me signaled the importance of high end savings. What you're saving, what you're setting aside, let it be high end for your savings. The second one is, this is coming out of the parable of the talents, where I'll just give you a quick refresher here. Master left 3 servants, each with a sum of talents. Talents are money in biblical days. One of them got 10, the other got 5, the last one got 1. The 2 that got 5 and 10 respectively each doubled their money through various investments. And the one that got 1 hid his money in the ground because he was afraid that his master would scold him if he had lost the money. And this verse really resonated with me. Here's what the master said to that one servant who hid the money. So you ought to have deposited my money with the bankers, and at my coming, I would have received back my own with interest. It's like, dude, at a minimum, you could have just left it with the bankers. I would have made a little bit of interest on it, and at least we wouldn't be in this awkward situation right now. Now I'm going to take away your money and I'm going to give it to the guy who had 10 and turned it into 20 because he clearly knows what he's doing, right? God blesses us with a certain amount of money each based on our own, I don't want to say capable, based on what he sees fit for us, okay? What we do with that and the way that we treat it respectfully and wisely and grow that money is God's expectation. That's our responsibility, right? So here are 3 steps I want everybody to think about when it comes to saving and investing. The first thing, save $1,000. Save $1,000 in an emergency fund, put it in a separate bank account, set it and forget it. Because guess what? When you have an emergency fund, an emergency becomes an inconvenience. And that's exactly what we want. What we don't want is for you to have to pull money if a tires blow out on your car and you have to replace all 4 tires, there's $800. We don't want you to borrow that money. Have that emergency fund set so that whenever life happens, you could deal with it. The next step is to save 3 to 6 months of living expenses. This is your rainy day fund, right? This is, and I don't know if anybody here has ever lost a job. I've lost a job before. And it was the most humbling experience. Aki, I see you raising your hand. Thank you for sharing that. Twice. Is that twice? Or are you saying peace? Like, thank you for, okay, twice. Wow, that's, yeah. So one of them, I guess mine twice as well, but one of them I was like 18 or something because I was doing summer school and my boss at the time didn't like that. So he fired me.
No, I was definitely older than 18.
Okay. So it's a very humbling experience. And I remember mine, when I lost my job, it was my first job coming out of university. I thought I was Mr. Big Shot back then. I was like, man, I'm working, I'm making money, I'm good, right? And let's go. It was the most humbling experience. And even though I was living at home with my parents, I thought to myself, what am I going to do financially? Like this is going to hurt my plan. I had a plan. I had a path. But I also had a bit of savings. So although it hurt me up here, it didn't hurt me financially, right? And reality is, guys, life happens. And you want to be prepared for it. So having that savings, that cushion of 3 to 6 months will allow you to bridge the gap between any work in the unfortunate event, if it does happen to you, and I pray to God that everybody's securing their jobs, but in the event that that does happen to you, you're bridged and you're okay. Cool. So save that 3 to 6 months of your living expenses. And then the third one is aim to invest 15% of your income for long-term growth. And I will be the first to acknowledge that 15% does seem aggressive. Work up to it. Okay, so here we go. Let's do some math. I like math. If you invested $100 a week, this is how much money you'd have by age 65, depending on when you started. So if you start at age 40, Aki, for you and me, that's like right around the corner, right, buddy? So if you start at age 40,
so funny.
If you start at age 40, $100 a week, I think I did this at 7%, is going to add up to $352,000. If you start at 30 years old, that's going to add up to $769,000. And here's the one I really like. If you start at 20 years old, about $1.59 million. Albert Einstein. Okay, if you guys are going to listen to me, cool. I gave you the disclaimer, I'm just a guy. But Albert Einstein is a lot smarter than I am. So here's what he said about compound interest. He said, compound interest is the 8th wonder of the world. Lucky are those, actually, no, I'm going to butcher the quote. Maybe Google it. It's something like, lucky are those who know how to earn it, and unlucky are those who have to pay it. Something like that. Okay, the poor man. I just, let me describe to you guys the theory of relativity. I'll butcher that too. I'm kidding. Guys, you have to laugh when I tell jokes. I can see your faces, don't forget. Thank you, Yusuf. I have higher expectations of you, Yusuf. So I encourage everybody to look at their options for investing. We could have an entire 8-hour session. We could have like an entire 8-hour session on investing alone. And actually I had started putting together a slide on like different ways to invest and like different types of accounts. And I realized, man, oh man, like we're going to be, this is going to go way over 30 minutes. Actually, I think we might be just at time. Okay, let's fly through this, guys. Any questions on saving and investing? No? Okay, cool. The next one, I like this one. Don't keep up with the Joneses. And there's a reason that I added so many is to the Joneses, because they have more. There will always be people who have more, and there will always be people who have less. Okay, but do not be deceived. Evil company corrupts good habits. And this verse maybe is a little bit harsher than the message that I'm trying to get across. It's very easy to get caught up in what has been normalized. And keep that word in mind, normalized, okay? I'm not saying that this is a conscious activity that we're keeping up with the Joneses, right? But this is a quote. Either Dave Ramsey or Will Smith said this. I've seen them both quoted with the same quote, so it's hard to know who actually said this, but it's a funny quote. It says, "People buy things they don't want with money they don't have to impress people they don't like," and it's just a reminder, like, what are we doing, right? Like sometimes we really do this, right? And here's the scary thing. I was trying to say this earlier is because these activities, a lot of our spending behaviors have been normalized. We become very unconscious to the fact that we are really trying to keep up with the Joneses, right? And again, I'll go back to my own example here. Like this is the tell-all. I graduated school, and first thing I did was I bought a nice car. I'm a big car guy. I really like cars. I bought a nice car. I spent way more money than I should have on that car, and it wasn't even 0% mark. It was like a real percentage rate, okay? And I felt really, really bad because 5 years later, I sold that car for a fraction of what I bought it for, like an embarrassing fraction. So it just reminded me, like, why did I buy that car? Why did I not set that money aside? Why did I not do good with that money? Why did I not blah, 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 blah? It reminded me of this idea of not trying to overshoot my capabilities and not trying to compare myself with anybody else, not having to have the nicest car, build myself up first, and then enjoy the cars when I've been established. Because I do still have intentions to buy a nice car because I'm a big car buff. And here's the pressure test I want everybody to keep in mind is ask yourself, if nobody will ever see the thing that I'm buying, is it still worth buying? Do I still want to buy it? If nobody was going to see the nice car that I bought, did I still want to buy it? Maybe, but probably not. I don't know. I mean, it was kind of fun, like having my friends in it and you know, driving like a goofball, right? And getting a few tickets. But if they weren't going to be there to share that experience with me, or if I wasn't going to be that guy who had the nice car, did I still want it? Maybe not. So ask yourself, pressure test your decisions. If nobody's going to see this, do I still want it? If nobody's going to see this upgrade that I'm about to put into my house, do I still want it? These really fancy shoes or you know, I don't know, purse or whatever people are buying nowadays, do I still want it, right? If the answer is yes, budget for it, go buy it. But budget for it, plan. Don't make immediate financial decisions, right? Especially if it's a big decision like a car. I'm going to hold for questions just in the interest of time. Cool, guys? The last principle, and possibly the most important one, is give back. And there are two verses here. There are many verses in the Bible about giving back. But the two that I chose to include here are, first of all, God loves a cheerful giver. Be happy about giving back. Be happy about building up your community, building up your church. This is our responsibility, and it's actually commanded by the Lord. I was going to include the verse where Jesus flat out commands us to tithe, but I figured that one was a little bit too obvious. Like we all know that. But the key message here is cheerful giver. Be happy about tithing. This is a blessing that we have. And the second one is whoever is generous to the poor lends to the Lord, and he will repay him for his deed. And the way I understand this verse, and Abuna, please correct me if you see otherwise, but repayment is likely not going to be financial, actually. And that's okay. We're already blessed financially. We work. We are blessed to have the health and ability to work. The blessing that we seek and the repayment that we seek from the Lord is probably more in the form of contentment, peace, closeness to him. Because if we're expecting financial repayment, then actually we didn't give. We just, well, the verse does say lend, so maybe I'm getting myself caught here, but then we just lent it out, right? So there are a few benefits of donating. It goes without saying, is helping the less fortunate, building up your community in your church. Giving promotes feelings of happiness. This, I read this somewhere once upon a time, and it resonated with me. And then here's the last piece that I'm gonna touch on here, is that giving unties us from the love of money. When we let go of the money that we feel is ours, it releases us from the love of that money. And remember, conclusion from 2017, which was on the very first slide or second slide, was it is the love of money that is the root of all evil. So our ability to let go, free ourselves from the love of money, give back to the community, and watch our labors at work go towards building somebody else up, that will promote feelings of happiness. It'll build up our community, our church, and of course, untie us from the love of money. So folks, I want to thank you. To recap, build a budget, make sure your income exceeds your expenses. If not, you got to do one of two things: either increase your income or reduce your expenses. But the equation needs to make sense. Cool. Number 2 is eliminate debt, all of it. Okay, all of it. Number 3, save and invest and focus on long-term growth. Okay, I don't know if anybody here is buying Bitcoin, but if so, let's talk after hours. I got a few words for you. Oh, Mark, you put your finger up. Okay, cool. Bitcoin terrifies me, man. But I'm a conservative investor, but that's just me. Number 4 is don't keep up with the Joneses. Become conscious of your motivators. Understand why you want to buy the things that you buy. And number 5 is give back, take care of your community and the less fortunate. So that brings us to the end here. I believe we have a bit of time for questions and discussion. Abuna, Aki, yeah, we do. All right, guys. So the floor is yours. Let's chat.
I have a quick question about cars. Sorry.
Hey, go ahead, of course.
I have a quick question about cars. Because there's a lot of people that say, oh, just get the car that you just, like, what is it called? What's the word?
That you want? Like
not financing it, but
leasing?
Yeah.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on leasing?
Huh?
What are your thoughts on leasing, Micheline?
I don't think it's a good idea, but a lot of people seem to say, oh, it's a good idea because you're always going to have a new car and you just pay, whatever X number of dollars a month, and you don't have to worry about it breaking down and cost of breaking down and so forth with an older car.
Yeah.
Mina, I can legitimately see it in your eyes. You're about to faint or something.
A
lot of people told me the same as well.
Yeah. So I want to hear from the group before I give my perspective, because I'm very opinionated. Mark read me like a cheap comic. I'm very opinionated when it comes to this topic. So I want to hear from the group first before I kind of hijack the topic.
I can't answer, because if I answer, I will hijack the topic. So I'm just gonna sit down and let somebody else answer this.
Anybody else? Any other perspectives?
Can I speak?
Of course, Mariana. Sorry.
All right. So yeah. So I bought a car, and I had to put it on finance because I can't afford to put like a whole payment all down there. The thing is that in our market, in our country, the car depreciates with time. So I don't know if I should. The problem is that with leasing, you'll keep paying. When I was on my previous car, the payment, I put it for 7 years, but I ended paying it in 4 years. But then with time, when I sold it, again, as you said, it's a fraction of the price, which is, unfortunately, this is a reality here. I don't know if I agree with one or the other, because I'll end up paying forever. Yeah. But should I just buy my car until I get it to the ground and then I go to a new car, or keep leasing?
Okay, so I
had an accident on car when I leased it before, so it didn't make difference. I had to fix it myself. So
yeah, which just ends up being more money towards the car, right? Like, so here are my thoughts on cars and leases. Okay, so Dave Ramsey, who, again, I'm gonna keep quoting this guy because he says things in a way that really like make things resonate. He calls them car fleeces. Fleeces. You're getting fleeced. Okay, And if anybody here has a lease, please don't be offended. Like, again, I said this is going to be uncomfortable. We're going to have an honest conversation. It's just, this is a perspective. But essentially, when you look at the value curve of a car, okay, car starts its value here, value drops sharply, and then begins to level out and actually plateau over time. Okay, so if you buy, for example, an 8-year-old car and sell it 2 years later, you're not losing that much money on it. If you buy a brand new car and sell it 2 years later, you're losing a lot of money on it. Now, here's what happens with leases is in a lease, the way a lease is calculated is you are paying for the term during which you own the car. So let's call it 4 years. You're paying for the first 4 years. That 4 years in the life of the car is the period in time in which the most depreciation will occur on that car. So you are paying for the most expensive time period in that car's life. And then you're giving it back. By the way, the value for you to buy it out is the wholesale value. So you've already paid like their margin, everything that they're going to make. You're giving that car back, and then you're picking up the next lease and doing it all again, paying for all of the depreciation from the top. Right now, a few years ago, I was transitioning jobs within my workplace. Okay, so I for those of you who don't know, I'm in sales. I got a company car. Okay, I was a junior sales manager, and then I transitioned into a customer insights role, and then they were going to take my car away. And I was like, I'm going to have to buy a car for like a year and a half. What am I going to do? Am I going to lease? Am I going to finance? Am I going to buy a used car? So I did a bunch of research. What I ended up doing was actually buying like a really, really used car because I knew that I was going to sell it. So for me, it was like buy an 8-year-old car that I'm going to sell 3 years later, and it was a little bit of money. But in my research, I actually did a whole bunch of math and read a whole bunch of reports. And the financially, the best time to buy a car is actually about 2 years old and get rid of it around year 8. If you look at the value curve and the depreciation curve, around year 2 is when a lot of depreciation has already occurred as a percentage. And the car is still good as new. There's still warranty on it likely at that point. Within that 4 to 6 year period, around the 8-year mark is when majority of cars begin to break down and maintenance costs begin to come up on the curve. So you want to get rid of the car before year 8. Now, it's actually harder to buy a used car. It takes a lot more work, a lot more research. It's a lot easier to walk into a dealership and just buy a brand new car. But if you're asking just how the numbers play out, year 2 to year 8, that's your window. That's the value window in a car's life. That window may change. If you're talking about a Toyota, that the window actually could look very different than like, I don't know, like a BMW, which actually depreciates much faster in the first few years, right? Or luxury cars in general tend to depreciate much faster in the first few years. But generally, it's around year 2 to year 8. That's the value window. But leases, you're paying for that first hit. So that's why I'm personally not a big fan of leases. Mark.
I should refrain.
You're a fan of leases.
No, I think there's a type of purchase for every person, depending on what they're looking for. What is the value that they're looking for, right? There are some people who say, you know what, I get leases because I'm not a car girl or a car guy, and I just want something that within the first 4 years, it's in warranty. I don't understand the mechanisms in cars and so on and so forth. I just want something that's turnkey, and I just want to focus on other parts of my life. Maybe it's my career, maybe it's my family, maybe it's whatever, right?
Sure.
So I think it really depends on your situation and what's the value for you. I think there is a certain type of depreciation and something about the country that we live in. Like if I was in Florida or if I was overseas or whatever, I probably wouldn't be doing leases. But there's something about having a car in the snow with the salt, with the rust, with the whatever, that makes you want to change your car more often because it deteriorates a lot faster. I'm not opposed to leasing as much in a cold climate as I am in a warmer climate. In a warmer climate, your car can last you 10 years very easily. It's the winter that starts to take a toll on stuff. Things start to creak, things start to break down. You know, the salt eats up at the rotors and the whatever, and the suspension goes, so on and so forth. I think it really depends on your risk tolerance as well. A lot of people say, look, I'll get a lease, I'm going to pay 1.9% interest. My 1.9% interest on that car is actually my insurance policy, my blanket insurance policy, that if that car actually depreciates more than what the value is to the dealership, I can walk away from it and say, have a nice day. So it really just depends on your risk tolerance. But that's just my 2 cents in a very, very small way of saying it.
And
yeah, may I interrupt this? Are we able to put a closure somehow so that we respect the timing? Sorry, Mina.
Of course, I wouldn't. Sorry, I got carried away, but absolutely.
No, it's okay. It's okay. We just because we have a game and we want people to enjoy the game. It's like 10 minutes a game, and you're gonna participate, Mina, in this.
Absolutely.
Game. Of course. And I see a Heidi. I'm not sure if this is your wife or this is another Heidi. But if
Hi, Abuna. It's his wife.
It's his wife. Hi, Heidi. Yes.
Hi, Abuna.
You have to participate, yeah, Heidi, as well.
As long as we both lose or we both win, Abuna.
Oh, yes, this is the rule number 1.
Otherwise, nobody's going to sleep.
We're very competitive.
So thank you very much, Yamina. I think this has been really very helpful and opening, and I thank you for the engagement, and thank you everyone for really engaging into this discussion. It's usually finance is one of the hot topics that really makes us really think and consider a lot of things. And I really like how you said that God does not hate money. God is the one who blesses us with the money. Actually, it's God who gives us the 100%, and we are just giving back to Him the 10% to acknowledge this is, thank you, Lord. This is coming from you. And I really like the principles that you shared. Thank you very much, Mina. Thank you, everyone,
for having me. Thank you, guys.
And let me invite Marina to lead us into the game.
All right, can everyone see my screen at this point?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so I will.
Guys, let's be competitive. And I want to hear and see the competitiveness. I'm competitive myself when it comes to game.
So I don't know how many people are familiar with the game Mad Gap. It's pretty much where the phrases don't really make sense, but you're supposed to sound them out, and it's supposed to come up with an actual phrase. So these are all Bible related. I kind of narrowed it down so they're a little easier. So the idea is you're supposed to sound out the words as fast as you can in your out loud or in your head to make up the actual phrase. And the idea is once you figure out what the actual phrase, the true phrase is, if you can send it in the chat so everyone can see it, and whoever answers first, Rhett will be keeping score and keeping the tally at the end. Does everyone get the game? Any questions?
Yes.
Great, so we shall start. I won't be able to see the answers, so can someone say what the actual phrase is, and I'll show the answer afterwards, just because I'm in the full screen mode. All right, so this is the first one here. Any guesses? You guys are welcome to say it out loud too, by all means.
Wow, this is challenging.
Is it David and Goliath?
Yeah, you
Yes, Yusuf.
Nice.
So I'm asking Marat to just keep score, if that's okay.
Yeah, I'm keeping score.
Awesome, thank you. All right, next one. So yeah, this is the answer right here. Next one.
Adam and Eve ate the fruit.
Yeah, that is right. It's actually even Adam, but it's close enough. All right, next one.
Joseph and Mary.
Yeah, you got it.
Oh.
You guys are pretty quick. Like this actually took me a long time and I prepared these ones.
You're muted, Micheline.
Pharaoh, king of Egypt.
No, I don't know the answer.
Yeah. Mina got it actually.
Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Yes, I got one.
Heidi, he got one.
Yeah, Heidi.
I know, I'm trying to Luna.
You have to
Next
get one.
Any guesses? No? Is it too hard? No one?
Maybe when we know the answer, it might become clear.
I'm really bad at this. Like
It's